The key to a CPM problem is drawing a good network. Sometimes the key to drawing a good network is working in pencil. Like in the case of this particular scenario. Let's take a look. Consider the project information in the table below. Oh, this is a CPM problem because all it does is list activities, how long they're going to take, precedence relationship, and then that's it. Actually, there's a little bit of instruction squeezed in here. Draw and analyze the project network diagram. That's why I got a hold of a pencil to answer the following questions. Now, we will do that. We will draw a network and we will analyze it. Funny thing though, like if you were in a hurry, notice that the first questions here, it says, if you were to start this project, which of the activities could you start on at the beginning of the project? That one question out of the scenario, you don't need a network for. You don't need to do any calculations. That one question is just about interpreting this data. If you were to start on the project, which activities could you start on right away? It's just asking you which activities do not have any immediate predecessors. That's just another way to ask that. Oh, so without doing anything else, A, B, and C, at least I answered the first question of the scenario. Second question of the scenario, how many paths are there through this project network? That's going to take a network diagram. All right. Now, just in case, because sometimes it's kind of hard to tell how they'll turn out, I'm going to switch to pencil. We always draw a network by drawing its start. Okay. What do we do next? We look for actually what that question asked about, all the activities that don't have any immediate predecessors, because they are here at the start. So I'm going to draw them. A, B, and C. Got it. They're all here at the start. Now, basically, I start working my way down the list. Okay, in terms of precedence information, who's mentioned next? Okay, D has A as an immediate predecessor. I can see that. I can add that to the diagram because A is here. When you're done with A, I'm just drawing that fact. When you're done with A, you could go on to D. Okay, then that one's done. And then I see that E, F, and G all have B as an immediate predecessor, so I might as well draw them. E, kind of like triplets. F, and G all have B as an immediate predecessor. When you're done with B, you could go on and do any of these. Okay, fine. Oh, they're off the list. Let's see. H is next. H has C as an immediate predecessor. All right, C is down here. Might as well add H. There's room. When you're done with C, you can proceed to H. Okay. Then I has G and H as immediate predecessors. Task I. So I should locate it near G and H. This is task I. G, H. Okay. And then there's only one other one. J has D and E. D and E. J will want to be near D and E, so to speak. So I'll put it here. J has D and E. Okay, and at that point I've exhausted the list. I have all of the activities themselves. I have nodes for, or tables for each of the activities. The network's not done yet though. The network is not finished until it has a finishing node. Just as every project has a start, every project has a finish, like a moment in which the whole project is done. We need to draw that. And label, yeah, okay. Finish. Ta-da, we're done. Oh, now this is important. Who should be connected to the finish node? What you're looking for, you might want to review, is every activity that has arrows pointing at it, but there's no way to leave it. Like if you were traveling, see J, there's only arrows pointing at it, but there's no arrows leaving it. That means it needs to be connected to the end. Now, it's not the only one, because if you look right here in the middle, F is the same way. It's a dead end right now. Can't get out of F. That means it needs to be connected to the finish. And then down here, you can get out, you can get out. Oh, I. There. The project network is drawn. Oh, now right here where I drew it, what actually was the question? It asked how many paths are through the network. Now you're probably thinking, oh, we're going to have to do like those early start, early finish, late start, late finish times. Yes, actually later, other questions. Don't need to do that for this question. A path is any route from start to finish. Any way to map from start to finish. To answer this question, why don't we just list them out as we find them? Paths. Well, let's see. If you were at start, the first thing you could do is go up to A, then to D, then to J, right? And then from J, that would get you to the finish. That's a path. A, D, J. Okay, now what other options are? Go back to the start. Well, you could go to B, all right, B. And then taking the high road, you could go to E. Okay, E. That would connect you to J, J, and then that could get to the finish. That's another path. Or go back to the start. You could go to B, go to F. Yeah, okay, F. And then, oh, from F, actually, that's a path. B, F. And then you would get to the finish. Fine. But wait a minute, go back to B. There's another option. You can go to G, G, then to I, and I will connect you to the finish. So that's a path. And then finally, down across the bottom, you could start out by going to C, then to H, and then to I. That gets you to the finish. And then there's nothing else here. Oh, all right. So it's asking how many paths. I was just listing what they were, but it just asks how many. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 paths. So for the purpose of the question posed right there, that's the answer. Oh, but there's lots of other questions about this project. Following that, what is the critical path through the project? What is the completion time of the project? Oh, now we've got to work on the numerics. All right, so we're going to work on those questions right there. I'm going to go back to we need the network. I'm going to go back to the network and I'm going to start adding some detail to it. I'm going to start kind of getting organized here because these are really tables. So let me draw the dividers. Kind of look like flags where you leave less room on the left-hand side and more room on the right-hand side. One of the things that does, speaking of setup, is it leaves a neat little pocket, the lower left-hand side, in which to copy the duration data associated with a task. A, for instance, I'm looking it up here, is 11 days long. Note that. It'll be handy later. A is 11 days long, B is 10 days long. I'm just copying data onto the network. C is 8 days long. D is 13 days long, right? E is 10 days long. F is 10 days long. G is only 2 days long. That's good. H is 6 days long. I is 7 days long, and J is 8 days long. All right, this was all set up. Now, to analyze the network, and actually to answer the second question that was posed, what's the completion time of the project? We need to find the early start, early finish times of each one of those tasks. How do you find early start, early finish times? You go to the starting node. You go to the starting node and you note everybody who's connected to the starting node. Okay, that's A, B, and C in this case. Good. Each one of them, their early start time is 0, because 0 is right now. And you have the option of starting on them right now if you were in a hurry. So in the case of A, 0 plus 11, if you were in a hurry, the earliest you could finish is in 11 days, because you could start right now and it's 11 days long. B, 0 plus 10, the earliest you could be finished is in 10 days. C, 0 plus 8, the earliest you could be finished is in 8 days. Now what we want to do is work our way across the network to the finish. Oh, all right, now go back up to the top. D cannot start until A finishes. That's what the network is telling me. A could finish at the earliest in 11 days. just pass that number over. That means D could start at the earliest in 11 days. It's waiting on A. Now 11 plus 13, it could finish at the earliest in 24 days. Okay, right, and how am I doing that? Let's see, is there room for scratch work over here? The early finish time of a task is its early start time plus, the actual task time. All right, now, look in the center here. You have all of these tasks that are waiting on B to finish. B could finish at the earliest in 10 days. That means that 10 is the early start time for each one of them, E, F, and G. They could start at the earliest in 10 days, right when B finished. In the case of E, 10 plus 10, the earliest it could finish is in 20. In the case of F, 10 plus 10, the earliest it could finish is in 20. In the case of G, 10 plus 2, it could be finished at the earliest 12 days from now. Now I'm looking at this one at the bottom, H. Let's see, H can't start until one arrow, trace it back, C finishes. C could finish at the earliest in 8 days. Then pass that number forward. That is the early start time for H. 8 plus 6 is 14. H could finish at the earliest in 14 days from now. We only have 2 other ones to do. Let's look at J first. Okay, J cannot start until trace the arrows back. D and E finish. They are its immediate predecessors. Now, what do we know? D could finish D in 24 days at the earliest, and C could finish at the earliest in 20 days. The question is, what is the absolute earliest, if you were in a hurry, that you could plan to start on J? 24 days. If you have a choice, there's more than one immediate predecessor, you always pick the larger, because basically you're waiting on both of them to finish. You can't start till they both finish. So when can you start? Well, whatever the latest one is, the largest number. Okay, so J could start at the earliest in 24 days. Okay, fine, 24 plus 8. 24 plus 8 is what, 32? J could finish at the earliest 32 days from now. Oh, and that we just reasoned through or practiced is known as the early start time rule. The early start time of an activity is equal to the largest of the early finish times of all activities that immediately precede it. And I is another opportunity to practice that. Because look, I has 2 immediate predecessors. G could finish at the earliest in 12 days. H could finish at the earliest in 14 days. You pick the larger. I could get started at the earliest in 14 days. 14 plus 7, what's that, 21? I could finish at the absolute earliest in 21 days. Now, we have completed the early start, early finish times. And I said, that'll answer that business about what is the completion time of the project. Well, it will if you know where to look for the answer. Okay, how do you determine at this point what the completion time of the project is? Go to the finishing node. Finishing node. Trace back and identify all of the tasks that are attached to the finish node. Look at their early finish times. J could finish, it's here at the end of the project. See, if you're attached to the finish node, it means you're one of the last things to be done. J could finish at the earliest in 32 days. F could finish at the earliest in 20 days. I could finish at the earliest in 21 days. These 3 things will be finishing up last. The project is not finished until everything is finished. Therefore, when is the earliest the project could finish? Again, you pick the larger, the 32. Completion time of the project, now we know what it is. J told us, so to speak. Completion time, 32 days. Meaning that if we are smart, we could get this whole thing done in 32 days. Now, that didn't answer the question of what's the critical path through the project. We can't answer that question until we find the late start, late finish times as well. And we can't find the late start, late finish times till we have that fact. What's the completion time? We said it was 32 days. Good. Take that number, 32. This will get us started on the late start, late finish times, because that automatically becomes the late finish time of each activity, each one, 32, 32, and 32. That automatically becomes the late finish time of each of the activities that is associated with the finish node. Oh, because we basically, in discovering it, have made it the deadline. We're saying that we could finish in 32 days, therefore we're going to finish in 32 days. Therefore, each task that's attached to the end has to finish at the latest in 32 days. Now what we want to do is find these late start, late finish timings, which is to say what's the latest you could start on something and what's the latest that you could finish it and still stay on time. To find them in general, we're going to begin at the finish node, just like we did here, and work our way back towards the start. Because, just like in the case of J, it's just logic. If we know it has to finish at the latest in 32 days, 32 minus 8, we know that it has to start at the latest in 24 days. Right, the late start time of an activity is its late finish time minus the task time. Think about it this way. We're now backing up through time. Here with F, 32 minus 10, the late start time is 22. Here with I, 32 minus 7, the late start time is what, 25? Okay, now we want to do this for all of them, so we have to keep backing up. Go back to J. Okay, we now know that J has to start at the absolute latest in 24 days. It can't start until, I'm just reading the network, D and E finish, tracing the arrows back. That means this is their new deadline. D and E, each one, has to finish at the latest in 24 days. Okay, now the subtraction. 24 minus 13, D will have to start at the latest in 11 days. In the case of E, 24 minus 10, it'll have to start at the latest in 14 days so as to not cause delays. Okay, now down here, I is sort of similar. We now know that it has to start at the latest in 25 days, but it can't start until G and H finish, so take that number and pass it back. 25, 25. That's the latest they can finish. 25 minus 2, in the case of G, is 23. That's the latest it can start. H, 25 minus 6, the latest it can afford to start is 19 days from now. And then we just keep working our way back. Or as long as we're down here with H, right, it's connected then directly if you're working your way back to C. If it's got to start at the latest in 19 days, you can just pass that number back. Okay, that just means C has to finish at the latest in 19 days. 19 minus 8 reveals that the late start time for C is 11 days. Notice that its early start time is 0. You have the option of starting right now, but what this is saying is that in the case of activity C, you could also start as late as 11 days from now, and it wouldn't delay the project. The project would still be 32 days long. Oh, okay, good to know. Now we still have, up here is another fairly easy one because it's one-to-one. In the case of D, we know that it has to start at the latest in 11 days, and it's just waiting on A, so you can pass that number back to the left. Now that's the late finish time for A. It's got to finish at the latest in 11 days. 11 minus 11 is 0. Oh, in contrast to C, activity A, the late start time is 0. The early start time is 0, the late start time is 0. I'm really relieved to see that because here's a little tip. Sometimes this arithmetic can get a little tricky. When you are working your way back, at least one of the activities that's attached to the starting node needs to zero out. The late start time needs to be 0 or result in 0. And why do I mean it needs to be? Because if it doesn't, if you have no activities at the starting node that the late start time is 0, that's a signal that you messed up the arithmetic. Okay, so good. I see at least one. We're probably still on track. Now, we still have one other task here to determine the late start, late finish times on. And this one, we should stop and think about this for a second. It's B. Okay. E, F, and G cannot start until B finishes. That's what this means. What we now know is that E has to start at the latest in 14 days. F has to start at the latest in 22 days, and G has to start at the latest in 23 days. Therefore, in order to not delay any of these, trip any of these up, when does B have to finish at the very latest? Now you pick the smaller one. This is known as the late finish time rule. The late finish time of an activity is equal to the smallest of the late start times of all activities that come after it. You don't want to create any delays, so you have to pick the smallest this time. Oh, okay, so that's what, the 14? All right, so the late finish time for B is 14, and then 14 minus 10 is 4. The late start time for B is 4 days. So with B, you could start right now if you wanted. That's its early start time, or you could wait as late as 4 days from now. And that shouldn't be problematic theoretically. It wouldn't create any delays. Now, why did we do this? Well, actually, publicly, for that one question, I said, to find the critical path. It asked for the critical path. The critical path through a network is one of those paths that I listed up here. It is the set of all activities that have 0 slack. Well, slack's the difference between like the late start time and the early start time, or the late finish time and the early finish time. So now you can see the critical path, because the critical path is the set of activities that those two sets of timings, when we work through them, they match. They're identical. Where do they match? Well, it's A. They matched. D. They matched. J. They matched. And then I should check, is this in fact, it's another check of my math, an actual path? Let me see. Start, you can go to A. That does connect to D, that does connect to J, and then that does connect to, oh good, yes, that is a path. Oh right, that's actually earlier when we were just talking about paths. That was the first path that I mentioned. That's the critical path through this project. That's the critical path through this project. Might as well officially note that. Critical path is A, D, J. That's the path who, when you add up the task times along the path, its length is 32 days. It is technically the reason the whole project will take 32 days. Okay, anyway, it's answered. What else is asked? What is the earliest that activity G could possibly be completed? Oh, that's easy. Now that we've done all this other work, the earliest that G, that is the early finish time of G. It's just asking us to go look that up. G, where's G? G's here. Early finish, right here. 12 days. Okay, how about this one? What is the most that activity F could be delayed in starting without delaying the project? Oh, that is also pretty easy given all the other work we've done, because this is just another way of asking for delayed in starting, late start time, and it's asking about F. Just have to find it. Okay, F, here. Late, bottom row, start, right there, 22. In the case of activity F, you could get started on that as late as 22 days from now, and theoretically, if nothing else went wrong, you would still be finished with this entire project on time in 32 days.